Okay, now that we've talked a little bit about how you paraphrase and what a paraphrase is and how you can write a paraphrase, it's time to think about how we put those paraphrases into our writing to help support our claims. So this short video is going to talk about paraphrasing effectively in your essays. Just a quick review, anytime that you're using an outside source in your writing and you're writing with MLA format, MLA citation has two parts. You have your in-text citation, where you give your signal phrase and parenthetical documentation, and then you have your bibliographic citations, which is that longer works cited page at the end. When you paraphrase, a signal phrase works the same way as a quote. You give context to the evidence you're about to present, you list the author, end, or the title, plus an action verb, and you make sure that it's grammatical. But let's take a second and think about the difference between summary and paraphrase. Remember, with a summary, you're representing a source accurately, you're looking for general ideas, you're giving a brief restatement, focusing on those central ideas. It's your own words, it can be selective, and it's often shorter than the original. A paraphrase is a little bit differently. With a paraphrase, you're really looking for specific ideas, and you're giving a precise restatement, not a general overview. A paraphrase clarifies or translates ideas. It makes them easier for the writer and the reader to understand, not more difficult. It's still your own words, but it's going to be the same length or longer than the original, whereas a summary is going to be much shorter. So here's a sample for paraphrasing. Students frequently overuse direct quotations in taking notes, and as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. Probably only about 10% of your final manuscript should appear as a direct quotation. Therefore, you should strive to limit the amount of exact transcribing of source materials while taking notes. And if you take a look here, we have an author, Lester James D. We have the title of the book, Writing Research Papers. We have it's a second edition, 1976, and we have our pages. We have all the bibliographic information that we need. But this quote, you wouldn't want to necessarily use it in an essay because it's really long and it's kind of clunky. It uses the word quote or quotation multiple times. It talks about paraphrasing and transcribing a couple times. There's ways to make this leaner, more efficient, and more importantly, more effective so that your reader can really understand it better. So make sure that you always note when you're using a paraphrase the author. Make sure that you know the title of the source that you're doing and the page numbers. Now, if you're dealing with an online source that does not have page numbers listed on the source, that's fine. You're just not going to have page numbers. So if we were going to do an acceptable paraphrase, this is what it would look like. We get a much shorter paraphrase than the original, and then at the end, we have our author's last name and the page numbers. And if you notice, this is a really important feature of a paraphrase. The period goes outside of these parentheses. So what this period says is that all of this information is part of the same paraphrase. If you put the period here before, it's incorrect. Now that's one way to do a paraphrase, but there's actually a better way to do a paraphrase. And the best way to do a paraphrase is to think a lot more about using those signal phrases. The tricky thing about a paraphrase is that it's your words. Somebody else's ideas, but it's your words. So it blends in very, very easily, which is a good thing for flow. Your essay is going to flow much better with a paraphrase. But it's a bad thing because it's hard to tell where your ideas start and stop. Using a signal phrase helps with that. Take a look. When we put the author's name or the title of the work right up front, and we use a verb to help describe what the author's doing, what we do is we bookend the paraphrase. So in this particular way, we have this whole signal phrase, as James Lester recognizes in his book. That gives your reader a really clear clue that the following information are ideas that you read about. Now, why is that important? It's important because most of us are not experts at anything. So the more that we can claim, hey, guess what? I read this. I did my homework. I know what I'm supposed to be talking about because I read enough to understand. The more that we can do that in our papers, the more authority our arguments carry. So if you take a look at this particular paraphrase, it's really better because even though it's the writer's own words, we have a clear bookending. The signal phrase at the beginning, and then at the end we have those pages in the parentheses, gives a really clear sense that everything in between them might be the writer's words, but it's someone else's idea. And not just anyone else's, it's an expert's idea. After all, if you're going to write a book and put your name on it, it's going to be edited, it's going to be fact-checked, and your reader is going to know that you've done your homework. So when you're thinking about paraphrasing, both are correct. You can use the kind of paraphrase that just simply puts the author's last name at the very end with a page number. That's perfectly appropriate. But whenever you can, if you can use those signal phrases to introduce your source, your writing and your authority is going to be much, much stronger. If you have any questions, be sure that you let me know, or you turn to your Rules for Writers handbook. It has a lot more examples of how to integrate paraphrases and quotations into your work, and it gives you kind of step-by-step instructions. But again, if you have questions, be sure to ask.